Artificial intelligence holds immense potential for generating economic and social value across critical sectors. But unregulated deployment of artificial intelligence enabled technologies could seriously compromise public trust and safety concerns in health, finance, education, agriculture, mobility, and law enforcement. Our next panel will discuss with the regulatory environment for responsible artificial intelligence. As you all guessed and got it right, the next session would be on regulatory innovation for responsible artificial intelligence. I would like to call upon the moderator, Ms. Nidhi Sudhan, the co-founder and CEO of Citizen Digital Foundation, along with the panelist, Mr. Muthian Chockalingam, the Senior Architect, Artificial Intelligence and Machine Language and Data Science, Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency, Mr. Ashok Balasubramaniam, the CEO of Openweaver India Private Limited, along with Mr. Rohan George, the partner of Samvad Partners. Thank you, dignitaries, for joining us, and the dais is all yours.
Hello. Hello, everyone. A very good morning to everyone, and welcome to NASTech 2022. My name is Nidhi Sudhan. I'm co-founder of Citizen Digital Foundation. The introduction has been done. We are a non-profit based out of Kerala in Trivandrum. We foster digital technologies awareness at citizen levels, accountability at business level, and informed action at governance level. And today, we're having an expert panel here to discuss regulatory innovation for responsible AI. I will just take a moment to introduce each of them. Before that, let me just set context to why we are here, actually. Ahead of India's G20 presidency, we are trying to set goals and benchmarks for the world to follow around a whole bunch of technology-related aspects, including regulation. I think a couple of days back, there was a report in the ET about the Digital India Act, which now might include provisions for data accountability and oversight, which is a huge step forward, which kind of sets context for what we're doing here. There's broad international consensus on the key legal and regulatory challenges of AI that circle around safety, transparency, explainability, human control, bias mitigation, and privacy protection as such. But there's less consensus on whether and how to tackle the broad potential of AI and the current socioeconomic effects of widespread AI adoption. The arguments around stewarding responsibility and accountability in AI are mostly about stifling innovation and the economic incentives thereof. So we have an expert panel here. Let me introduce Mr. Chockalingam Muthian. He's Senior Architect, AI, ML, and Data Science for Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency. He'll be talking about AI policy and frameworks of the Tamil Nadu government and giving full context to that. Mr. Ashok Balasubramaniam, CEO of Openweaver, representing the meta digital narratives in the private sector. Mr. Rohan George, partner, Samvad Partners, representing the legal perspective here today. So without much ado, let me open with what your individual positions are on how AI regulation impacts innovation and scaling of businesses and their economic returns. So, Rohan, would you like to start, and then we'll...
Sure, Nidhi. Hi. I think, we had a fruitful short discussion before the session began, and then we realized that how AI impacts innovation differs significantly about whether we are talking about adoption by the public sector or adoption by the private sector. And today, I think without knowing it, AI, or at least ML, is integrated into so many aspects of our life, right? We don't even understand the ways in which it is. And the one very trivial example, which I saw, and which had definite legal implications in my mind, was this new AI filter on Instagram, which allows you to show your profile picture in the style of so many different artists, and genuinely in the style of different artists, in the sense that it looks like it's something that artist could have created. Now, that has taken a certain level of personal innovation and appropriated it, basically, right? and converted it into an innovative AI product. Now the question arises as to who would be responsible. Number one, the question arises as to whether there is any intellectual property appropriation which arises from such an act. Okay, is it a copyright infringement? Is it somebody's, like, is it some artist's, basic lifeblood which has been translated into an AI product, right? If you want to ask from the emotional perspective as opposed to legal perspective. The second question then is, if there's such a thing happening, who's responsible? Because somebody just trained an AI to do something. They did not perform the act, right? So how do you establish product liability, for such a situation? And the third question basically which arises from that is actually the question which a lot of people are worried about on a systemic level, right? You have a situation where human effort and endeavor is capable of being translated into an automated decision making or an automated algorithmic process. So what happens to the human in that equation, right? So this, I thought that example is that this small Instagram filter is actually a great example of the significant ways in which AI can impact our lives from both a normal perspective and a legal perspective as well. And that artist, for example, now how will he be compensated? What will happen to his opportunity cost basically in terms of being able to create a project? So how on a systemic level should we acknowledge these problems? So in other words, what I'm saying is, clearly AI is going to move forward in a way that is, that is going to impact our lives in significant ways, and without us realizing it, it already has. Okay, deep fakes, for example, are a reality of our lives now, basically. They are all created by AI, right? We have AI systems in a lot of transportation solutions, in a lot of financial solutions. We have systems, or at least ML systems. We can, if we are willing to exchange the words ML and AI, we have those systems in all these solutions. The question then is about acknowledging the fact that these things have the capacity for damage and legislating for that damage or regulating for that damage. The one thing I would warn against in that context is creating a special one-size-fits-all legislation which only deals with AI. My concern in that is that people will feel the job is done, that AI has been regulated, and that now we don't have to worry about anything else. But in the context of data protection and privacy, AI has a role. In the context of product liability, AI has a role. In the context of intellectual property, AI has a role. In the context of of labor law, AI has a role. So we need to see it from a systemic 360-degree perspective in terms of regulating AI. And while we make a concerted push, it should not be limited to just one regulatory push.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Nidhi, for having me on the panel, and good morning to all, and thanks to NASCOM for having us on this panel as well. That was a very deep start, so no offense, but startups don't start with a lawyer at first. He'll tell you what all will go wrong, okay? So dream first, and then regulation should follow. So I think that sets a good context, actually. If you ask, your question is packed in multiple dimensions, right? So we said there is AI, there is regulation, and there's business and economy as well. So I think we should separate both, I think, because it's a very nascent situation. AI is nascent. AI being used in business is even more nascent. It is maybe at 5%, 1% of potential. And thankfully, I think AI and business is running much faster, and I think regulation is where we need to catch up. So maybe if we set that AI and business a little aside and say, hey, what does AI mean for regulation, or what does regulation mean for AI? So this is Chennai. How many Rajinikanth fans here? Don't be shy. Yeah, good, good, good.
Not. Everybody is.
Okay. So see, if we were Rajinikanth, right? So you would say, Chitti, Chitti, show me a red chip, I will come and regulate, right? But where is the red chip? Is there a red chip called AI? So I think that's probably a huge question to start with, right? Because we all say, hey, we will regulate AI, we will regulate AI. But what is AI? I think is the first thing that needs to be unpacked. And if I look at it, I think there are three dimensions, essentially. So I think first is the core technology, right? I think over last 30, 40 years, I think the AI has been there. Look at it simply, I think first there is predictive, there is a human in loop, then there is ML concept, where you say it's a supervised learning, things may go wrong, but little less. Then unsupervised, then you have reinforcement learning, and then, now we have ChatGPT. I'm sure a lot of you should have used it. If you're not used it, please know, it says it's a Google killer. If it's a Google killer, I think all of us in the room might get killed as well. So that's the generative AI. So I think first dimension is the technology. So I think it's critical for us to understand saying, hey, what is the technology maturity? What can it potentially do, right? So that's the first part of AI. Second part of AI, I think you touched upon phenomenally well. I think data is the core of AI. So is it a narrow intelligence? So for example, AI can be used to say, the schedule for NASTech, and maybe if it's at the keynote is at 11:30, maybe we'd have got more people coming in. So that's probably the mistake it could do. Or it could be like ChatGPT. It's like true general intelligence. It can talk anything from coding a new program all the way to telling you what you should do in your free time or what is the next article that you should write. It can tell you to do that. So that brings the third aspect on where are these things used. So if they're used in something that is simple, who are the actors? Can we kind of manage them well? Versus something like unsupervised reinforcement learning, which is generative, but there is no human in loop. It is absolutely open to billions of people to interact both ways because it learns as well. So then the concept becomes that it is much more disruptive. So for example, ChatGPT that was launched 5 days ago has about 1 million users already today. While there are a lot of good things, a Berkeley professor asked it a question saying, can you write a Python program to identify a true scientist? So it wrote 3 lines of code. It said, if gender equal to male and race is equal to white, scientist equal to true. So that's the damage that something that is at that scale can do. So I'll maybe take a pause here to essentially say, don't look at AI as one red chip. It is everywhere, and what it does maybe impacts how we should regulate it.
Sure. Mr. Chockalingam.
Yeah, good afternoon all. So private sector would be doing much on AI, and then I represent the government. I mean, the government always catch up things. that's the way we look at it. So what we do in this part, Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency, other than e-Sevai, which predominantly many of you know because a lot of centers outside. So other than that, we have a center of excellence which deals with AI and data science. So we came up with a policy in 2020. Tamil Nadu Safe and Ethical AI Policy. So it's still there in the site. If you hit the exact phrase you get from ELCOT. So we don't do a top 10 search. So you hit the exact phrase, you get it the number 1 from the ELCOT site. So we formed 2 things. One is the TAMDEF framework, which extensively got corrected from the industry as well as there were partners with us working for that policy. Academies were there, and then some of the larger companies were contributing to that. And then there is a frame how to implement that. So we have a deep max frame. So scorecard. So these are the things we did initially. And then what next? So predominantly we work only towards, we focus on 3 areas: government to citizen, government to government, and then government to business. Government to business is very little, it's only licensing kind of thing we do. Government to government is more. Government to citizen is very less. As a TENEGA perspective, the IT department perspective. So we said, okay, we'll go with some POCs. We built some small POCs focusing on 3-4 sectors: health, agriculture, social welfare, and then energy. So these are the 4 sectors we focus because they have an IT cell inside each department, and we are not such big to handle all the departments. So we took some data from them, start building solution around it. So it was quite well. POCs were good, and then even NASCOM awarded us for two of our projects in consecutive year, one in health and one in agri. So we got those awards. After that, so expectations start rising. So every month I need to do a POC. That's what the target said, because every month some minister should launch it, right? So he's quite, our minister is quite energetic. He wants new things happening in his department every time. So we collected data. So then we realized, government is one missionary have huge data. No one else, no companies would have those kind of data sets. We have a lot of citizen data, but predominantly it's unstructured. And then second, it's only demographic. So how to share this? Because then we came up with Tamil Nadu data policy in 2022, which is March. And then subsequently we went with the second one called reference standards, because most of the things by the government is through procurement. All these web application what you see is done through a procurement agency. So we said to them, okay, you supply in this standard, because you supply something and making to those standard later is very difficult once you roll out. So subsequently we did two things this year. So initially we said, okay, we'll regulate the data first, because data policy talks more about open sharing, government to government data sharing. We don't even have a proper government to government sharing. Everybody sends us to TNEGA, but we don't know how to share it with other department when they need. But predominantly we use data today to make policy decisions, scheme design. So last 1.5 years, you see a lot of policies coming out. It's typically through data-driven initiative. So that's where we are. So we'll talk the next round.
Thank you for your initial opinion. So my job as a civil society organization is to be the voice of the public, right? So what I glean from a whole bunch of the discussions that we've been seeing, not just here, but even before that, is that we have plans, we have focused on onboarding the next, half of our population online. We need to give access to technology and AI to everyone so that the opportunities are equitable. But we're also working in silos, right? So the important thing about this is that how can we collaborate and bring together all these forces for good so that it works in people's interest? And there's no doubt that technology can do a lot of things. The question is what technology should and shouldn't do. So moving on to the next question, and we'll keep this as an open discussion so that they can also talk to each other about this. What are the avenues of public-private partnership in creating preventive and reactive frameworks or guidelines towards fair and equitable AI processes? Now, this is, again, a very broad question, but I'm sure they're capable of picking it in their own direction as well. And we need to discuss the practicality of this, because we can all talk idealistic, right? The importance is to make sure that we talk about the practical aspects of it, especially collaborating business, legal perspective, and the government's plans in this. So, Chockalingam, would you like to start this?
So, before this, you have to read a book called Coders. It's a very we need to launch in 2000. It's pretty old, 2 years old book. So all this platform you see, Twitter, Facebook, all are just built by engineers like us. We don't think much about what is the next level, how people use it. We don't know. We just build thinking, okay, this will change the game, or this will change good things. So after that, and now you see, a lot of fake news coming in those. 90% or 80% of the news coming are fake news through this medium. So the same way we started with government also. The moment I get, personally, if you say someone talks about some data, I get very enthusiastic, start building something, because I have my own team, so I don't want to wait for someone to come and instruct. So I went with the health department and then said, I will build you a platform for getting your population health registry. So that you can design your hospital system as well as your patient approach. We had a scheme called Makkalai Thedi Maruthuvam, so door-to-door service of medical services to the home. So this will be very easy. So so my boss, he also get interested. I said, okay, go ahead. We started collecting people's disease information. What is your primary disease? There are only 5, A, B, C, D, E of health, which is your arthritis, BP, diabetic, and then epileptic, and then cholesterol. So this is the A, B, C, D, E of life. So if you see the individual component, it is only in a single digit. 7% of the population in India is having this, 8%. But if you see as a family, this will be close to 100%. So that's what the study we did. The moment I started collecting this information for 3 months, and then one of the officers came and told, what you are doing is wrong, because somebody takes this data, give it to the pharma industry, they can directly profile a person and then create this marketing strategy. So that's where we end up. 3 months, the project got halted. So it's kicking back, and then starting with the government is very difficult. So we have to convince, and then we have to put a framework around it, what to share, what not to share. So these are the experiments. Even government is today in a very learning phase. Every project, we think it's only a technology solution. Then always our superiors will say, you are solving, it is only not engineering, it's a social engineering you have to think. So we learn by doing things. I mean, that's a small leverage government has given to us in terms of emerging technologies. The rest of the market is very matured. Buying a software from a private agency is very easy for us. We float a tender or we go with a closed procurement process, and then we get things done. The moment comes to data, and then on top of it AI, still we are in a very matured, very less matured in that area. And then for the government to procure, we got this policy done. So this is applicable only for the government. Any government departments want to buy a AI solution, they will just take a policy, and then they take the deep max scorecard, and then we have a questionnaire for that, and then we rank accordingly. So one of the simple application we did is a facial recognition system. So everybody would have known that's a pretty first use case when AI has come. So we don't have any Indian faces. So very crude, we started like we collected all the Tamil movies, video movies, and then collected those faces, and then started training. And then we went to the school. We want to put that attendance system in the school. So we collected faces of the kids. And then we realized what we are doing is not right. I mean, attendance is one thing. So attendance, if you see, the good motto behind is like finding out the dropouts. So the dropout doesn't happen in a day. So students, I mean, the guy come weekly once, then it slow downs. By the time you catch him, government misses the guy, he gets dropout. So if you know the pattern, so we can avoid dropouts. That's a good intention we started. Then we realized there are some of the challenges around it. So we put, now the solution is running our own attendances. We put all in the government offices, and then our attendance is happening through FRS. So that's how we learn, keep learning through something through mistakes and something through after implementation. So somebody come and tell us, okay, this is going to be the implication, you can correct it before, because every iteration is costly for us.
Ashok, would you like to add to that?
No, absolutely, and I should commend the amazing work Chockalingam and his team are doing, right? So I think healthcare, this learning side, e-governance, I think phenomenal ideas that are coming out because of AI. But I think if you flip it and look at the context, right? So it's an amazing team sitting in Tamil Nadu, a small team building some of these solutions. But think about AI. Trillions of dollars of money going in creating AI. So everything that is coming out today as AI, like Rohan was saying, it is there everywhere. It is in your phone, it is in Netflix, it is everywhere. So those have been built with trillions of dollars of investment, and our framework that says a Tamil Nadu e-governance will absolutely, I'm assuming it doesn't match it. So that's the pace at which we are at, right? So how do you flip it? How do you flip a situation where you say there is trillions of dollars of speed which is fueling AI, and you need to look at a framework that can run like that, because we can't wait, right? We can't wait and say, hey, okay, today morning ChatGPT landed, let's put a committee, a subcommittee, and next year we will have a framework to regulate ChatGPT. Probably by that time, I think NASTech 2023, instead of me, maybe a bot will be sitting in this place. So that's the pace at which things are changing, right? So if you need to regulate it, we need an absolutely different way of thinking. We can't think saying, hey, let it come, I will regulate it. So there, and where Openweaver's research and solutions are focused on, to say, how do you leverage something that is omnipresent as much as what you see in AI? So today, keynote, Rajesh was introduced, such as a huge company, 250,000 employees he manages in that company. So if you have a company at disposal for you, which is 400 times bigger than that, what could it be? So that's open source for you all, right? So if you look at GitHub's October's 2022, 100 million developers contribute to open source. And they have made 500 million contributions in a year. So even if some of our service industry people might be there, if you put 1 hour per contribution, it's like a $15 billion given for free. So we have about $15 billion worth of innovation created every year that is given out to you. So that helps in two ways. One, I think it is a scale, right? Because AI runs at huge scale. All of our lives are impacted. It runs at a speed of innovation which is fueled by all of these things. And it is so pervasive. Every aspect of our life is dependent on AI. So if you flip it and look at open source, we're saying now it is a 400 times bigger company than a typical outsourcing company. There are billions of dollars of investments that are going into it. And there are at least our knowledge set today is about 500 million assets that are there from open source. So that's the scale that you can use to address it, and why it helps you address it, right? So for example, the beautiful thing that he said, hey, we started image recognition, face recognition, and the facial features here are different from what it is. So I had a great anecdote. I was in Japan many years ago, and they showed me their facial recognition. It was about 15 years ago, and it said, hey, I'm 50 years old and something at that point of time. Because their skin patterns are so different. They age very differently than what we do. Our colors, textures are so different. But what's going to happen is if you look at open source, there are probably 1,000 solutions available for facial recognition. And the way for us to regulate, I would say, a way for us to contribute, right? So we could rather think of it that says, hey, can we get the best facial recognition solution that's available on open source? And can we add this training data that says, hey, here is a branch or a fork that I created that says, hey, here is a Dravidian version of what could be face recognition features for this demographic or this ethnicity. And that can again be used by that 100 million people or the whole world. So, so we can actually think of a system that is not just can run as fast as AI can run, but instead of waiting for us to say, hey, let a solution come and then I will regulate, you now get into the engine room because by nature open source is open. And you don't need to wait for someone's approval to say, hey, can I add this? You create a fork, pull request, push it in. So your solution is already now baked into it. And of course, I think people who want to take it will take it. People who don't want to take it will not take it. But you've already contributed back to that large ecosystem that says, you know, that I am now solving a problem that a Dravidian facial recognition has been solved. And the next person, like you said, the children. Someone can build on top of it to say, okay, this is a general population. For children, I will build something on top of it, and then they open source it. So that collective growth is going to be huge. So those are two dimensions, the speed and getting into the engine room. And the last one is, again, a very important thing, often overlooked, is this whole inherent bias, right? Because like the ChatGPT example that I talked about, it's a closed ecosystem. So some engineers in the West Coast said, hey, it's, you know, these demographics fit what someone is, or they trained it on a very selective data that gave that output. But now if you think of these 100 million developers who are contributing, so Chockalingam's team contributes, my team contributes, Rohan team puts in something, all of you all start putting in. By rule of statistics, the bias will go away. Because if we sit here and say that is biased, it of course will be. We can always complain, we can always wait for someone to regulate it. But if we all start actively participating, that bias will flatten out. So that's again a phenomenal way. You know, you can run at scale, directly be in the engine room to contribute, not just regulate, and active participation to remove bias is what I would say. You know, 3 ways that you have something in our midst that you can use to contribute and not just regulate to shape AI.
Thanks, Ashok. That's actually a very interesting point. Rohan, if I may just steal 1 minute to reiterate one of the points that has just come up. If you notice how when we pan out, when we look at government services, the public is very critical because there is a lot of public accountability that the government has when it comes to any decision that they take, right? So we question a lot of their processes. But if it's a private sector, let's just take the Google and the Apples of the world, and when you have a whole set of privacy, you know, terms and conditions being thrown at you, we just quickly accept and move on because we want our convenience and ease and mesmerizing experiences, right? So at citizen levels, because it's I'm the only voice representing the citizen level here, I'd like to make this point that it's very important that the same critical intrigue and questioning that we throw at the government, we should also be throwing at every technological interactions that we have. And the facial recognition data example is one of those. So tomorrow, if my children are unable to access a loan because the AI system that's full of fancy features has done it for me, I should be able to question it, and there should be explainability and transparency processes in place for a common citizen to go out and ask as to why am I being denied a loan, right? Because it could be historical biases, it could be so many biases that have set in. Sorry, Rohan, go on.
No, not at all, Nidhi. Actually, this is a very relevant point, which is what I was going to start with, because Mr. Chockalingam pointed out that you have these great, very well-meaning initiatives which are started up, but then of course the government fairly realizes that that there are issues in implementation which need to be addressed, and this is not something that stops the private sector because they don't have to face those same issues because of accountability. So, not in the same way at least. There is some obviously some level of accountability, but not the same level. So, what then is the problem then? The problem is the lack of clarity of rules, the lack of a framework in which to operate, basically. It is possible, for example, to visualize in answer to your question, a way for the private sector to coordinate with the government to develop SOPs, for example, for efficient data collection, right? Minimum foundations. But where do those SOPs have a foundation? They have to have a foundation in some kind of overarching principles with regard to responsible data collection, and that requires a legislation or requires some kind of regulation. And in the absence of that, very often, we tend to be afraid of law, basically. We are afraid of having a rule set placed on top of us because we are worried that will slow us down. And yes, our bad rule set will slow us down. But a good rule set gives us clarity on how to proceed. The government is no longer worried about the negative consequences of data collection because they have SOPs which are derived from regulations, which are derived from legislation, which give them systematic clarity on how to make sure they collect data, for example, right? And of course, there can always be challenges on the ground level implementation stage. But those challenges then have a framework in which they can be addressed. So that makes a huge difference. And that's why I always feel that, with contracts as with regulation, clarity is much more preferable to being smart or being cute or avoiding something or leaving out something which you don't want to address, basically.
Right. Thank you very much. So I've just been reminded that we're short on time, we're running short and we're heading out for lunch. So quickly, do we have time to just conclude with how the government processes can participate in this? Do we have 1 minute for each of them? Or, okay, all right. So mindful of the time, we'd like to throw the question dais open to the audience. If you have any questions for the panelists here, would you like to ask now?
And to the delegates, we just have space for one question, a gentle reminder to you.
So one question.
So make it worth the while.
Anyone? Yes, the gentleman over there. Yes, please. Could we pass a mic to him? Or, yeah.
This is an important topic because it's the e-governance here and also the AI. So it's all about data privacy. Lots of people data are there, and there are talks, some cyber attacks is coming up. So how well we are prepared in terms of cyber security, in terms of the artificial intelligence, is that we are well prepared on the data privacy on terms, especially on the e-governance side. If you can just say some onto it.
So it's not only on AI. So any web application. So if anybody builds even the in-house development or a procurement process. So once the UAT, which is a user acceptance, is done, so we put under a security audit. So we are empaneled with certain vendors. So MIT has given us some list of cyber security companies who are certain certified. So we put the application to them. They do all the kind of penetration tests, and then they provide us a certificate. So it might be 3 iterations, sometimes it goes till 10 iterations. So the one who gets certified, then only it goes to the state data center. So otherwise it's with us forever. So if you couldn't able to pass those things, it's with us. So there is a system in place. It takes your development time might be 1 month, and then we even had 2 months spending just passing the security certificate. We get frustrated sometimes. They keep putting low, medium, high, low, medium, high. So we have to get, there should not be even a warning. Even if it is in yellow color, you have to go and fix it. So that's the kind of thing that's already in place. I mean, cyber security, we had a policy in 2019. One of our LCOT is taking care of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists. I hope that answered the question. This is an ongoing conversation. It has to happen at many levels. So I hope this triggers more people to participate in this. So let's wind it up. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. I believe that's the end of the discussion.